Hello everyone, my name is Leslie Kelly, and for this fall 2022 Business 410 course, I will be talking about using Tableau to extract data to discuss DE&I. For those who don't know what DE&I stands for, it stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It is commonly referred to as a phrase that broadly outlines an institution's efforts to create a more welcoming environment for people of less privileged identities. For example, this can mean ensuring your upper management is not entirely compromised of white individuals or implementing mentorship opportunities for young professionals of color in your workplace. As a whole, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts seek to create meaningful and systematic changes towards more equitable and respectable environments. I currently work for Dotdash Meredith, which is a advertising and also a media content creating company. For those who don't know, my company produces magazines like Birdie, Better Homes and Gardens, and People Magazine. Recently, we took a pledge for our companies to have more diversity and inclusion. We even made sure within each company we took a pledge to make sure all of our content is non-biased, to make sure it has no anti-Semitism, no racism and hate within our content. So not only is our content created for people of color, but it's also created for people of non-binary and also part of the LGBTQIA community. Today I will be talking about diversity within tech companies, the Fortune 500 CEO, and also racism within the HR industry. In Tableau, I have all 5 pieces of data to go through, so I will start with the percentage of race. In order to determine the percentage of race within each state, what I did was I did measure values in my columns, and in rows I chose state and measure names. Within the measure names, we have American Indian, Alaska Native. We have Black, Asian representation, Hispanic, multiple race, Native Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islander, and white. And within the measure values, I made sure I put averages within each race and made sure each measure name was in color, so that way each individual was represented. Going from all 50 states, it was broken down based on race, on the percentage of each race and identity. And since this is a lot of data to go through, I decided to break it down in another way that's a little bit more easier for all of us to understand. By making a map by longitude and latitude, and also filtering my measure names, state, and also by race, I was able to pinpoint each state and base their color on race and other identities. So for example, for Alaska, we have an average of white at 60%, Hawaii and Pacific Islanders as 0.2%, multi-races at 0.8%, and at American Indian and Alaskan Native as 15%. That's just one of the examples. Like over a place like California, where you see like more Hispanic and Black and more Asian representation, you see less white. Even here in New York, even though we see an average of white, we have a bigger percentage within Black and Hispanic communities. Each state is labeled for each race and percentage, and even though the numbers are very different from everyone else, if numbers don't lie, we still need more representation within our race and culture. And you kind of want to ask yourself, how does race fit into DE&I? U.S. workers and HR professionals say that racial discrimination exists in the workplace, but there are a vast difference in perception on how widespread it is. It depends on the race and the person who you talk to. Those most likely to suffer from discrimination tend to be more critical of their organization's commitment to enhance racial diversity. So, in one of the data sets, there was actually a survey that went out to people to find out where racial equality exists within HR. In this pie chart that I created, there was the survey that questions that went out were a number of ethnic minorities who feel that the career has been obstructed a lot due to their race, people who reported there's no racism in the place of work, those who reported racial stereotyping, those who reported verbal harassment, and those who who were reported subject to occasional and persistent microaggressions during their HR careers. And the numbers don't lie. One of the things that 90% people have complained about was microaggression during their HR careers. Second place goes to those who felt like they were being paid less compared to others who are working at the same level. Those who need to censor their personality and their identity to become an obstacle within their career, and those who felt like they were obstructed a fair amount because of their race. This actually gave me a lot of questions, especially when it comes to those who didn't report no racism in the workplace. They either ignored it, or they basically went over their shoulder, because even though we're in 2020, we're still going through situations where people are facing racism within the workplace, or feel like they're not getting paid a lot because of their race. Because now in New York, we now have officially presented pay transparency, where everyone is required to announce their pay rate based on their position, where the position is located, and then year's amount of work. One of the problems that was highlighted by this research is that organizations are not talking about racism and social injustice. More than 2/3 of organizations, mainly 67%, have not asked their employees about their opinions on racial justice and the protests that started within not only just COVID, but also with George Floyd. Some organizations are starting to talk about racial inequalities. 1/3 of those surveys have hosted plan to host an employee meeting, such as a town hall, to discuss the stance and actions that are being placed to take against racial injustice. And 1 in 5 have allowed to plan or allow workers to take time off to join a Black Lives Matter protest. Now I want to talk about female CEOs. The number of women running America's largest corporations have hit a new high. According to the data, it actually has hit almost 7.4%. Throughout 2020, going up into 2022, and 37 of companies of Fortune 500 are led by female CEOs. For those who don't know, the Fortune 500, which ranks America's largest companies, has been a large scene at the microcosm of the U.S. businesses at large. For that reason, the number of female chief executives on the list is closely watched statistically among those who track diversity and gender within the board of rooms and C-suites across the country. Within my graph I did it based on year and the sum of number of CEOs going from 1970, where we had our first female CEO, and then the number started to either dwindle or started to even out throughout the years. It took a major dip in 1995, where we had no CEOs, and then it made a huge leap from 2000 going up into 2020, with over 7.4% of women being a CEO. The number of women running Fortune 500 companies are influenced by several factors, including executive leadership changes and companies either growing to make the list for the first time or shrinking to fall off of it. So much ever that the ever-vacillating number is not a scientific assessment of the state women in American business, but it does provide a useful snapshot. With the overall picture that women run over 7.4% of the business in Fortune 500 is significant, there are still some microtrends worth noting. Most of these women leaders are concentrated at the bottom of the Fortune 500, where companies are smaller. Only 7 women run Fortune 100 companies, and who knows, and right now we don't have the percentage for 2022, but we can see there's a huge shift throughout the years. It's still small, but it's better than having female CEOs now be shown for their talent and their grace. The last thing in my data set I want to talk about is diversity in tech. Diversity in tech is all about bringing more perspective to a traditional homogeneous and often non-inclusive industry. Today, women and people of color lack representation, and diversity rates, even though diversity rates have been increasing over the years, but it's not quickly enough. In this treat method I created, I broke down and filtered state type from company, percentage of females, males, whites, Asians, Latino, Black, multi-race, other, and undeclared, and I also did it based on the count of employee diversity in tech within 2018. So from companies like Pinterest, the Fortune 500, Tumblr, Google, Pandora, LinkedIn, Amazon, and going so forth. You can see within the data, there is about 56 to 62%, 44% within the data. I wasn't able to filter it out in a way that's more readable, but as you can see within the data, there is not enough racial or even women or people of color participating in these type of tech situations. And even though this is from 2018, I know for a fact within 2022 the numbers are starting to grow, especially for women who are learning how to code, and even individuals within race learning how to be more efficient within technology. The reason why I chose this topic is because, number one, I am a DE&I certified recruiter. Number two, it is important to learn and to understand, especially here in the United States, where racism is very real and it is very hard for people to get a job, not only because of the color of their skin, but also because of the way of our culture isn't educated enough to learn about what is the better way to not only include people of color as individuals, but to treat them as equals. DE&I is about creating a workforce that reflects the world that we live in. These programs bring together people and individuals with different backgrounds so they can work together as one team to create a common goal. Inclusive cultures often result from investing time into building relationships of levels within your company. As an HR representative, I do take this very seriously, and we try to make sure that within the United States, but also within our respective communities and cultures, that everyone is treated fairly and equally, and to make sure that once a person is hired, we're treating them with non-bias and no hatred towards one another. Within our government, that's something that needs to be changed as well, because as you can see within government, there are more white people than black people, or more white people than Latino people, or more white people than Asian representation, or people from even Alaska or Indian descent are able to run without facing some kind of bias or hate culture. To me, this is very important, and it's something that needs to be discussed within our world, not only in our world, but in our workplace, in our love life, in our homes, even with our families, because the numbers do not lie, and we see it within our government, and also we can see it in our workplace. Racial inequality is very real, especially for those who work in HR, but not only working in HR, but also working in diversity within tech. So with that being said, I hope everyone has enjoyed my presentation. If you have any questions and comments, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, and have a good day.